At Staples Business Advantage, our team of experts can help you find the breakroom products to satisfy everyone's preferences, while AI can
suggest popular items, monitor stock levels, optimize pricing, and automate reordering.
AI can do a lot of things.
But I can never know the taste of a truly great cup of coffee. Sigh.
But you also can't get hangry.
This is true.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations plus our team's experience to make stocking your team's breakroom easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
For exclusive podcasts and more, sign up at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, a journalist delves into the abuse, lasting trauma, and economics surrounding the troubled teen industry. We'll review the new podcast, Gooned. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also,
how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
All right. Thanks for letting me do my intro in such a smooth way, Kevin.
Sure, go ahead.
Also with
How was your day?
It's going okay. How's yours?
Super.
All right. Can I go now?
Sure.
Also with us.
Did you take the dogs out before we recorded? Because we're going to be here a while.
Teddy
you
did it,
Okay,
yes.
good.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of The Final Curtain.
I think I left the iron on.
Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca. Boy, I need to make some tea. I'm going to be back in a little bit. Just kidding. I just got a new teapot. It's a very exciting day in my world.
Oh, is it electric?
No, but I got my new induction cooktop, and you can boil water so fast on that mother effer. It's amazing.
Yeah, Kevin, your fancy fellow teapot is induction. That's how it works.
That's how, I figured that's why I get boil water so fast.
Kevin I got him last year as a gift, one of those very fancy fellow teapots with the wooden handle. It's like one of his favorite objets. It's very, very fun to use.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm going to have some tea. I hate tea, but I can make it.
It's really increased your tea consumption substantially.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happened to me, Kevin, because I get this shiny red teapot. It's beautiful. And I'm like, look, I can boil water. It's like 2 minutes or less. Boom.
Yeah, and you know what I'm using it for now? Hot water bottle.
Yeah, we've got 2 hot water bottles in bed every night.
So this is no problem. Just hit a button.
Our hot water bottles have like plaid Scottish wool koozies on them.
God.
It's wild. And Kevin's always like, you want some hot cocoa? Like anything that could use hot water for like a year.
Yeah. I pour the water out of the hot water bottle into the hot cocoa and vice versa.
Yeah. Anyway, and finally, our captain of all things cynical, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
Toby, what would you do if you had instant hot water at your command?
If I had instant hot water, what wouldn't I do?
Exactly. So many uses.
Yeah. There's tea, there's hot water bottles, there's hot cocoa.
Mm-hmm.
Runs the gamut.
Toddies?
Yeah. Could probably pour it over spaghetti.
No. I use it for ramen. I make ramen in this very
I'm trying to figure out other uses.
Yeah.
Cream of wheat, maybe.
Yeah. Oatmeal?
Or oatmeal.
How about the tub? Do you have a nice bath?
A tub? Put it in a tub. Just like jump into a hot tub of scalding water.
You'd have to temper it, with a bunch of cold water. But.
Yeah.
Okay.
When we first got
it'd also take a pretty big little teapot to fill up a tub, probably.
In this scenario, Toby, you are not for any hot water.
No.
Any amount.
Oh.
It's infinite. Infinite means forever.
Life is good.
Yeah.
Hot tub?
Hot tub?
You don't want to get it to quite boiling.
No.
But,
no.
I got denied for a hot tub this week by my condo board.
Oh. Were they afraid you were going to hook it up yourself?
Well, you're not allowed. I wasn't even going to get a fancy hot tub because like I don't have the wiring, but I was like, could I just get one of those plug and play ones and put it on my sun porch? And they were like, no.
Wow.
What kind of gulag do you live at?
Apparently, I know I can't put up Christmas lights. There's a lot of rules, but they said it would, the weight of the water would cause the porch to settle and that could like affect my sale value down the road. I was like, I'm here to stay, people. I want a hot tub. So
maybe you should lobby the condo to put in a. Well, you don't want a communal hot tub. You don't want to get like legionnaires.
No, and I don't think, especially because I live with like a bunch of retired people. There's a lot of things I don't want to see in that hot tub.
Not to mention there was actually a legionnaires outbreak like not too far from you a couple of years ago because of a hot tub.
Beach, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Delicious.
Oh boy.
So just a heads up, I've got a special guest in the studio today.
Oh, show us.
The new kitten?
Yeah, and when he wakes up, I think it's going to be
cute,
kind of a fracas.
Adorable, snuggly.
Yeah, he's out. So he and Olaf are fast friends, which means they basically spend all their time wrestling. And I think it takes a lot out of Wallace. So he's been zonked for a couple of hours, but he's going to wake up and like hit the ground running. So anyway, fair warning.
All right.
Oh, I can't wait. This is the highlight of my day.
We need some Instagram videos of this cat wrestling. The world needs this.
Yeah. I put on Twitter, like sort of their first encounter where Wallace does some pretty slick moves. And then after that, it's just been full on. So yeah, I'll get some stuff.
Good.
Well, Kevin, I think that pretty much comprises the chit chat part of our podcast this week.
You never know.
What are we talking about? This is obviously Monday's edition of Crime Writers On. What are we talking about on Thursday's edition?
Yeah, on Thursday, we're going to be talking about the HBO original documentary film. It's called Great Photo, Lovely Life.
Okay. Can we
I gotta give like a trigger warning.
Yes.
To like for a week ahead of time. It's pretty powerful.
It's very powerful. It's a very intense documentary, but that doesn't mean no spoilers that you shouldn't watch it. I'm just going to say that right now.
Just be forewarned.
Just be forewarned. It's an intense one. Can I just give one programming note, Kevin?
Yes.
We've been having a couple technical issues with the podcast lately on the back end. And we are working on them, especially for those of you who listen on Spotify. We've notified our audio host, that people that work on the back end of that we've had some issues for Spotify listeners, and they promise us they're working on it. And so you may have seen funny things like an episode coming out twice. That's because we're trying to get it to Spotify people. But one thing that I wanted to say for those of you who listen on Apple Podcasts that would really help us out, if you really want to support our show and love our show, if you could set it so that our podcast downloads to your phone if you're planning on listening to it, that would really help us out because the new iOS has changed all of its default settings, and a lot of podcasts like ours, some people are missing it coming out in the feed altogether. So if you love the podcast and you really want to support the podcast, one thing that you can do is set it so that, it downloads the most recent couple of episodes or however you want it, or always downloads the episode. That would just really help us out in terms of making sure that our listeners actually get the show that we're making.
Every time there's a change to technology, it like threatens to blow up your entire show.
Yes. Yes.
It's like, where's your show been? It's like, where it's always been.
Exactly.
How come Apple messed it all up?
Exactly. And it also is not great for our business either. I
have one programming note, too. We want to remind everybody that tonight, and this is if you're listening on Monday, and this is if you've got an actual episode and not 5 seconds of silence like some people get. We're having our Patreon holiday parties. Every year we have our patrons join us in a live broadcast and come on and we drink eggnog and we're really looking forward to it. Laura and Toby, are you going to be joining us?
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, is my presence really required? Of course I'm going to be there. I'm going to wear my favorite Christmas outfit. Just get ready.
Okay, great.
Are people going to be bricked?
It's going to be, Grosse Pointe brick.
Well, you had to cancel your karaoke party, so we're going to be making up for it.
I know. That was super sad. I know.
Yeah, remember last year, Laura, you were doing it like in front of the fireplace?
Mm-hmm. I was quaint AF last year. We'll see what this year brings. We'll see.
Bring a light.
I will.
Because it's all pitch black except the fire over somebody's shoulder. This black outline in front of it could be a microphone.
Yeah.
So
Kevin, we don't have to do it here in the studio. We could do it at some like romantic, cozy location.
Yeah, I think I'd rather do it in the studio.
Laura's hot tub.
Laura's hot tub. Yeah.
I'm going to put my hot tub somewhere else. It's going to be right downtown Exeter. The Exeter hot tub.
All right.
Communal hot tub. Right in the
gazebo.
Yeah, in the gazebo. Perfect.
It's a bandstand, not a gazebo.
What's that floating on the top there? Hopefully it's just bubbles.
Is that enough stalling?
Strangers.
Is it time for us to review the podcast that we're supposed to be listening to this week?
Why don't we do that?
All right, let's go ahead and finally start the show and review the thing we are reviewing. Kevin, can I go ahead and finally drop that first clip right now?
Yes.
Let's go ahead and get that done.
It just sounds like you're delaying even longer. All right, let's do it. All right, drop the clip. Here we go. Leading off.
All right.
The troubled teen industry has been in the business of abuse, neglect, negligence, and malpractice for decades, despite both publicized and buried cases of death, injury, and suicide.
The troubled teen industry, or TTI, comprises the wilderness programs, therapeutic boarding schools, and group programs desperate parents turn to when their kids are struggling with mental health, substance misuse, and behavioral issues, whether real or perceived. But many of these programs employ methods based not in research or data, but use deprivation of basic needs, peer pressure, and abuse to force kids into a state of compliance rather than healing.
You really are kind of playing a game. You're scared and you're a kid and you're not going to fight back. You become submissive because they've got so much control over you.
Often kids are escorted to these programs by so-called goons, transport agencies hired to take kids away from home, often against their will in the dark hours before dawn. But are these goons a last resort tactic for families at the end of their rope, or a high-ticket legal kidnapping operation?
Looking back on it, kind of wannabe military fatigues, like black outfits or whatever, and they beat the piss out of me. I tried to beat the piss out of them. I was like a $110. I was a featherweight trying to go up against heavyweights.
In the new independently produced podcast, Gooned, journalist Emma Lehman details many facets of the troubled teen industry, interviewing survivors, former employees, and even impersonating the parent of a teen in crisis in order to dig up dirt on what she asserts is ground zero for the emotional, physical, and psychological abuse that leads to lasting trauma for those the industry is claiming to help. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from Gooned, so if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So Toby, we got to talk about it. The style of this podcast, pretty flat, pretty monotone, and pretty much a drone sound behind the whole thing.
Oregon became the first state to regulate teen transport companies with Rule 432 of Oregon's Involuntary Commitment Proceedings, titled Standards for the Approval of a Secure Transport Provider to Transport a Person in Custody or on Diversion to an Approved Holding Hospital or Non-Hospital Facility.
Did you find the style of this podcast compelling to listen to, yes or no?
I did not. I don't think many people will. You know, part of making a podcast is making it something that people will want to listen to, whether it's entertaining or enrapturing or, you know, however you want to put it. And this doesn't seem to put a whole lot of thought or effort into what the actual presentation is like, particularly for the narrator. I mean, I think that's, you know, the big thing that hangs over this entire project is, do you want to continue listening just because it is just so flat? And there's really, it's sort of unrelenting too. It's not flat and then suddenly it gets more exciting and then it goes back. It's pretty much the same tone throughout.
Yeah. So, Kevin, do you want to talk for a second about who it is that's producing this podcast? I think that's important to acknowledge.
I mean, you said independently produced. It seems to be the sole production of Emma Lehman.
Yeah. And,
you know, she already identifies as a very young journalist, kind of starting out here with this project.
This is her second project. She says she's 23 in the podcast.
She's writing research. She apparently identifies some outside consulting. So this really could, you know, it's not attached to any sort of studio. This is really kind of, I suppose, a labor of love for her. So it feels like when we do this, it feels like we're punching down, because if this were Wondery, you know, with all the resources they have and they turn this out, like, we would just fucking destroy this.
I don't want to say we. You don't want to speak for everybody in the panel necessarily.
All right. Well, we'll see when we get there. But even if we're grading on a curve, this is a really deeply flawed podcast from both the production and the content aspect. And I think we'll probably go into that.
Do you think the style is a part of the problem here? The narrative style?
Yeah, I mean, if Toby started to touch on it, big problem sort of this flat narration. It's kind of like I think it's trying to emulate, you know, the public radio read honed by This American Life. And I think we were actually making comments about this very recently for, I can't remember which podcast it was.
Rutherford County,
right? And especially when it's like narration heavy like this. It's not exclusively narration, but it's really narration heavy. So you do need some kind of life in the delivery. You know, if she sounds bored, then we're going to be bored. And sometimes it kind of sounds like the way she's reading is she doesn't want to disturb the person in the other room while she's recording.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of sort of hesitance. But yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things I think that like could have benefited the project would be maybe a heavier hand from somebody who has done a million of these,
right,
to kind of make it sound a little better. I think the narration also, like, it could have been punched up with musical interludes. And by that, just like a little transitional sting. Like, I guess there's like some kind of tonal stuff in the background.
That's all there is.
I know they have like original music. I don't really hear it throughout, but if you are going to like steal one thing from This American Life, don't steal the narration style, but it's sort of the production sensibility that like we're going to break up all of this talking with a couple of music cues that set an emotional tone and break it up for the listener.
Yeah. Well, not to belabor it because, we don't, necessarily always talk about narration style.
Mm-hmm.
It really hits home when you hear Emma actually speak to somebody, in an interview, and you actually hear her be curious and stunned. And she's like, really?
We had an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment. We had 17 people living in the 2-bedroom apartment.
Oh my, like 17 people from straight?
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, where was this curious person before?
I was like, is this even her? I was really surprised. Is that a producer? Is that her?
She had energy and everything. I think
it doesn't sound anything like the narrator that we've heard.
Really could have used a lot more of her in the interviewing.
Right. So something that I really want to talk about, because I know, because I've had a discussion with it with my husband at home, that we have differing opinions about this, is a journalistic tool that Emma chooses to employ in this podcast, which is impersonating somebody in order to get taped interviews for the podcast. I have very strong feelings about this. Laura, I'm curious to know what your feelings are about Emma pretending to be the mother of a troubled teenager in order to get taped interviews with agencies that transport children, with educational consultants, etc., people within the industry that she's investigating.
Yeah, no. I guess I look at my background as a journalist. I look at my background right now as a private investigator. I always have to identify myself when I go out on cases. I'm a private investigator. You hear stories about people that think they're going to run some sort of undercover scam. That's not going to hold up anywhere. Also, it's super misleading. And in this instance, I was listening to this as I was walking where she called. And yes, it was very interesting to hear what it would be like for a family member calling one of these transport agencies and asking all the questions, get all the information, because they probably would not have talked to her if she just called and said, I'm a journalist making a podcast about how I want to expose the goon industry. But for me, I just feel like absolutely not.
But within 5 minutes of talking with Diane, she said,
you basically have two choices, a wilderness program or more of a residential program that gives them the ability to stabilize, get settled.
She recorded the phone call. Is that even legal? I'm not sure where she is, where those people are. I had questions about the legality of doing that. You know me. I love a good expose. I would love to be like, ooh, look, I went undercover and I found out this information. But there's like industry standards that you have to follow for ethical reasons. And I feel like, to me, that sort of shot the credibility right there by going about it in that way. So, I mean, if you're the police, you can do an undercover operation, but she's not the police. So I had some real issue with how that was done.
Well, Laura, you know that even in a two-party record state that the police would need a warrant from a judge in order to legally make that recording. We don't know if she were in a one-party or two-party state. The difference being two-party state, both sides have to know they're being recorded.
We know she lives. We know she lives in California. We don't know she made the podcast.
We don't know. Yeah. And it's the kind of thing like you probably don't drop that in the narrative. Like, by the way, I was legally able to record. My take, Laura, and I think we differ. Is like I don't really have a big problem with posing when you're an investigative journalist. You're right. It is a tool. I'm curious about whether if afterwards she went back to the educational consultant and revealed who she was and asked for further comment, because we haven't gotten to the end of our podcast here, and I don't know that. But I mean, I thought it was very productive, and other than the fact that like no listeners don't care, but like I said, you and I were thinking like, I hope this was legally recorded. You know, I think that's the kind of thing where if you have somebody that can help you out and give you advice, then maybe that gets handled in a better way. Like, I love the advice that we give on patreon.com/partners in crime media.
I guess it is time for that.
Yeah, when we're doing our advice shows, like
Business
Mary
section
with
time.
Podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the music is, right?
I understand.
These musical transitions
well,
kind of breaks things
We're
up.
going to come back to this conversation after the business section, though, right, Kevin?
Well, yeah, I couldn't resist.
Okay,
You know, I'm
yes.
looking at the time. I said,
Yes.
this is a good time
Yes.
to break up this conversation and to sort of move things along, asking you to come and join us on Patreon. Like we said, tonight we're having our annual holiday party. So if you join us, make sure you got some eggnog. Other things going on. We're going to be doing the Crime Writers on After Show. This week we're doing gift recommendations, book recommendations that would be great books to give as gifts this holiday season. We each have a couple that we think, you know, would be great to wrap up, hand to somebody. Tell them this is what you're doing in the next 12
Laura,
hours.
don't do your porno again.
She's like, I promise nothing. You never know. Don't give it to grandma, though.
It makes the holidays so much more titillating.
Absolutely. Other things we have there is Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club. We have our Married with podcast that we say. And remember, you can also get all of our episodes ad-free and early at the Let's Do What We Do level. So that's what we have on Patreon. Also, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter.
It's free.
It's free, and you get information about, hey, here's why the podcast was 10 seconds long today. Go to crimewriterson.com, put in your email address. We promise that we will only send you solicitations for Viagra 3 times a week and not 4.
Your newsletter is so good, it's got like a 75% open rate. It's incredible. It's incredible.
You know what else was in it this week was some very exciting news for those people who want to see all 4 of us in the same location.
That's right.
Coming up at the Exeter Lit Fest, April 5th through 7th, 2024. We will be doing some Crime Writers on adjacent events, which is very exciting.
Right. All right, so Kevin, does that end the business section?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. So, Kevin, you think the best advantage most defendants can get is a smart lawyer?
Yeah, and they get smart from tutoring services like those you can get from Academic Approach.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's tough to be a student these days, right? You've got really tough classes you got to get through. Maybe you're cramming for the SATs, the ACTs, middle school exams.
No kidding.
No shade, but we know that a lot of our students didn't really progress the way they should have during lockdown.
No kidding.
That's like what they could really use a hand, especially if they want to achieve. You got to check out Academic Approach. They believe every student deserves a personalized training plan for their mind. Just like your fitness experts, right?
Absolutely.
They tailor it to different students. They like to say that tests are standardized, students are not.
Okay.
That makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they work with your student, try to find out what their goals are, where they're already achieving, and then try to get them to think about their lessons in a different way so that they can get the most out of their time. So say goodbye to that one-size-fits-all tutoring approach and say hello to a tailor. You didn't say hello.
Hello.
Say hello to a tailored academic workout with Academic Approach.
Ready to build your personalized academic fitness plan? Our podcast listeners get an exclusive offer. Visit academicapproach.com/crime writers.
Crime Writers.
Today.
It's with a W.
At Staples Business Advantage, our team of experts can help you find the break room products to satisfy everyone's preferences, while AI can
suggest popular items, monitor stock levels, optimize pricing, and automate reordering.
AI can do a lot of things.
But I can never know the taste of a truly great cup of coffee. Sigh.
But you also can't get hangry.
This is true.
At Staples Business Advantage, we help you select from 2,000 break room products, so you can be sure there's something for everyone.
Yum. Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
I never did anything to harm my daughter or my granddaughter.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Oh, man.
Casey Anthony's Parents, the Lie Detector Test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
So, Toby, before that ham-fisted entree into the business section.
Hey, now!
We were discussing Emma's choice to call people and pose as somebody else and tape those conversations in order to obtain information about this industry, which, by the way, would be a fireable offense in the newsroom where I work. It's right there in the code of ethics that you can't pretend to be someone else. But anyway, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, when that happened, what it recalled for me was when we were watching Navalny, and Alexander Navalny starts calling up, I guess, KGB agents about their attempt to poison him.
Suspected KGB agents, people he suspected of being KGB agents.
Right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let's not get sued on that. And
you know what? You don't want the Russians coming after you.
Yeah, that would be bad. So I guess the question I had, which it sounds like you might have an opinion on, is why is that hilarious and fun? And then this is, unethical and super problematic. Part of it is I don't really have a sense of how Emma is positioning herself. Is she positioning herself as a journalist, as a researcher? I mean, I guess I don't have a sense of that. And maybe part of it is just my natural, being not very sympathetic to these people who she's kind of hoaxing. But it didn't strike me as being super problematic, but I'm interested in hearing why maybe I'm not getting it.
Yeah. So to me, there's just a lot of a spectrum of journalistic issues with this. And she does, I mean, by the way, all the press materials for this podcast frame her as a journalist. So I'm assuming that that's the framing that she looks at herself with. There are myriad other ways she could have gotten exactly the same information without posing as another person on the phone and taping these people without their consent. Myriad other ways. She could have interviewed experts. She could have asked these people as a journalist to talk to her. She could have found somebody who used to work in the gooning industry by looking on LinkedIn. She could have asked a parent who had done it to see their quote or talk to a parent about it. She actually has a source in the podcast who is a parent. So she could have gotten another source who is a parent who has used one. I mean, there's so many other ways she could have gotten that information. Whereas Navalny, I don't think there's any other way he could have figured out who put poison in his underwear other than him trying to do it himself. I really don't. So there's that. There are other journalistic issues with this podcast, like assertions that don't make sense. For instance, saying about Google reviews, all of a sudden bad Google reviews of this business were taken down and a bunch of good ones showed up. That's every business. A restaurant does the same thing. A resort does the same thing, as if it's unique to this business. There's an assertion that, I couldn't find someone to talk to who was in this situation, the situation where the courts had put them in this TTI outfit after their parents got divorced, after parental alienation was, claimed. I couldn't find a survivor of that to talk to, which just proves that these victims are voiceless. I'm like, no, it proves you couldn't find someone to talk to, that maybe there aren't as many people out there who have been victims of this as you're asserting there are. There's so many things like that in the podcast that her then calling people and pretending to be somebody else, to me, it was just you need an editor, man, to tell you that is an okay. If that's your last resort, that's your last resort. But to me, that's not the last resort here. That is a last resort tactic, not a first resort tactic. I mean, that's where I land on it. And for me, the Navalny thing, that's a last resort tactic. I mean, that's how I see it. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Does that make sense?
It does kind of. I mean, I don't necessarily agree that Navalny really, that was his only option. I mean, that guy had huge resources.
True.
Compared to Emma, who.
But they were trying to murder him. The stakes were really high. They were trying to murder him. I mean, that's where I see the difference. But I do want to talk about something that you said, Toby, was that these aren't good guys. So can you just talk about what you think this podcast exposes that's important? Because you've got lots of notes about that too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the troubled teen industry, and it's something we've looked at other podcasts that have looked at this, but it's awful, basically. I mean, I think there are probably some reputable programs. I mean, there's certainly some that have been around since I was a teen. Not that I was involved in any of these, but Knowles and Outward Bound and stuff have been around forever. I don't think they necessarily fall into sort of the rubric that these do. If you're willing to expose these people, that's signing your name on the SATs, as far as I'm concerned. You already get some points. And I thought some of this stuff was actually pretty interesting and stuff that we hadn't heard before. I think her talking about that ridiculous trade organization that they have, where it's essentially just a fee collecting organization that doesn't do anything else and occasionally like will testify and sort of say stuff until they're really, really pushed on things. And it turns out they don't do anything. So I just thought her sort of look at the institution, like broadly drawn, the institution of the troubled teen industry. Like I learned quite a bit from that. I also learned that it hits pretty freaking close to home, is in like 3 miles away at University of New Hampshire, where the guy who has the database supposedly for all this data they're getting works at UNH and actually helped found their like outdoor learning center, which I've been to many times. So, this clearly has problems. And the whole time I was listening to it, I was like, if she had just could have gotten like 2 people with experience, like one person who was like a story editor and one person who was like a producer, to sit down with her and sort of craft the story so it was a little more, crafted for engagement rather than sort of like, I could see this as a report, rather than a piece of journalism. And then, just have somebody who's a producer to be like, and then like, trust me, I get this too when I'm doing my podcast. It's like, can you do that again, but pretend you're awake? And,
does that work? Because we'll use it.
And things like that, and I think it could have been like, I think she's got interesting information. I think the topic, it's never like not timely because kids keep going to these things and it doesn't seem like regulation is getting any stiffer. I just thought that this could have been so much more. And I think it was a lack of sort of resources and people who she could go to for advice on things might have been a problem. But that's speculation.
Yeah. And I think, Toby, this would probably made a really interesting magazine article as opposed to, trying to produce it and render it in this this medium. One of my big concerns, though, is the amount of editorializing that she does. I mean, I was surprised, like right in the beginning, she comes out like wondering out loud how this educational consultant, I think she wonders how she sleeps at night. I was like, ouch.
After discovering the truth of the troubled teen industry from the perspective of those who had gone through it, I was struggling to feign ignorance and struggling even harder to understand how Diane slept at night.
But it's full of like all these editorial descriptors that I just think are unnecessary because a lot of it's self-evident, but, she'll say things like, the educational curriculum is lacking. Well, I mean, says who? You? There's no attribution to some of these things, which would be fine because I'm sure people will say that. There's an example where she says, and again, this is like editorializing, she describes something as NatSap, which is the organization Toby was referring to, that they have quote unquote research. And then like 30 seconds later, there's a soundbite when the person says, quote unquote research. Like that's an example of sort of bad writing because we call an echo lead, but that is an example of how you could use that. She doesn't need to say quote unquote or say that it's whatever, it's horrible. You have people to say that and you can set them up to say that and use only that and make that point, even if you want to like put your thumb on the scale. But there's just like a lot of passages where it's just her piling on, which is, again, I suppose fine, but you don't need to push a boulder that's already running downhill.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you're likely to get, trampled yourself. So I had a problem with the editorializing because I didn't think it was necessary.
I mean, as you point out, Kevin, too, like after hearing about how horrible the kidnapping is, which I agree is horrible, and the fact that you can pay for it, she then does a rundown of the quote and that the hotels are overpriced, that the car rentals are overpriced.
You're supposed to bring receipts, Rebecca.
But I'm also just like, aren't you paying for the time for these like people to come? It's like that's not addressed at all. Like I'm assuming that you're also padding it because of the hourly rate for these people to come. And
one little thing
kids.
For me, and then I'll just shut up because I need to shut up. It's very, very hard in an audio medium to comprehend all those things. Like this costs this costs that. And it wasn't like $5,000. It was like $8,270. And then compare that to the market rate of whatever. You can't process that listening to it. That's something you got to watch. And more importantly, don't give me all that. Tell me why is it important. Give me the context instead. Don't tell me what every line item is in the thing. That's fucking boring.
There's actually,
and I missed the point. If you're just going to say, they mark it up 75% from whatever, I don't know how you determine what market rate is, but live in my world, right?
Market rate for kidnapping.
Exactly. Yeah. One great audio example of numbers that I just want to point people to if they want to hear it done well. Yeah. My colleague Taylor Quimby produced an episode of a series called Windfall for Outside In, where they were talking about this ridiculous kilowatt complicated fucking situation, and he used marbles in a bucket to like demonstrate. It was so smart. I'm not saying that would have been good here, but also like, don't these people deserve an hourly rate also for kidnapping? But Laura, you have to admit, the kidnapping is fucking bananas.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess I had to put myself in the position of what desperate level of parenting would you be at where you felt like that was an okay option for your kid? You know, but the fact that they're so nonchalant about it, the fact that they have it all prepared for the airline, like we have this thing that like signs, and don't worry, once they get to the airline, they never run. Like, you know, usually they're scared in the beginning, but then they're like, well, they're just resigned to be there. But the visual that I had in my head of these guys, like getting on a plane, flying to wherever that was it Idaho that she was posing as?
Utah, maybe? Yeah, somewhere there, yeah.
Renting a car, driving to the house, coming before dawn because you knew everybody would be gone and whatever, or be asleep. It was really quite something to think about the context of how parents could rationalize that as being an okay thing to do for their children, and what position they would have to be in where they felt like that was the only option that they had for their children, and that somehow they were rationalizing this as this is what needs to happen at this point. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I think that's what I was thinking. You know, I'm like, whoa.
I do. I mean, I know more than one person, and one person in particular that I know very well, who a therapeutic boarding school like saved their child's life, period. Like, and even the adult child now would not dispute that in any way. Very structured program, group therapy settings, great academics, the whole thing. Therapeutic boarding school in Connecticut literally like put when she was a child from a really difficult situation on course to have like a really productive young adulthood. And she's still struggling with the kinds of things one would struggle with if they have mental health issues, but like really, really, really great program. And that's never acknowledged in here, I don't think either, that there are some really great ones. But the other thing, Laura, is there are some clearly not great ones, as in one where you get rewarded with a bagged salad.
Yeah. So I think what was interesting is we've heard a lot of these, you know, I wouldn't say a lot, but we've listened to and watched other media about this whole industry. And I mean, you know, we had the really dramatic one where the kid like tried to escape them on the mountain and disappeared and died and all that. In this case, though, it was like, it almost reminded, as I was listening to it, I think maybe just because we just watched a cult documentary and I was thinking about cults, but like the moving up the levels and the certain behavior that you were having to adhere to, and your reward at the end was the bagged salad, and how excited some of these kids were for the bagged salad, and how to them that tasted like the best vegetable ever because the food there was so bad. I definitely got like cult vibes of this, like, well, you're in level 1 and then, you know, you want to go to level 2 and then you got to get to level 3. And it was like this whole sort of
Scientology.
Well, it definitely was. I was like, oh, this is so interesting. So this place is basically like a cult. So yeah, that was fascinating to me. But, you know, when you were saying there are some that are good, I mean, I liked the inclusion of the one guy who was like, actually, this did turn my life around going to this program. And I'm still in touch with the people that I went with.
He credits Straight for giving him structure, for teaching him what he was capable of, and ultimately for keeping him alive.
It gave me tools that I've used the rest of my life and I've built on and developed. It also had some dysfunctional shit that went on. It's got negative and positive effects on me.
Like when Kevin was talking about the editorializing that was happening in this, that was the part of this picture that I wish there had been some more pushback on. I wish that there had been a little bit more on the flip side of like, there are some programs that are fucking wacky, but there are also some programs that are good. And yes, they are probably also strict because in some situations, that's what you need. And I'm not condoning any of the horrible things we heard in this, but I think there's a bigger picture here. And that like you said, you had somebody that you knew who had a child that went to a program and it really helped them. And I think, you know, it would have been interesting to hear a little bit more about that perspective.
I want to push back on that a little bit in that, I mean, she's pretty clear, and it wasn't a surprise to me that none of this is based on actual evidence. Like there's no studies, there's nothing that shows that these programs actually work. I mean, I think there's sort of a societal expectation that this kind of thing, but it seems like it's based on some really like sort of retrograde ideas about how you get people to change their behaviors, which is essentially, as far as I can tell, you know, if you suffer enough, you'll be willing to comply with whatever we want you to comply with.
If the program involves that, which they don't all do.
Right. But the ones that she didn't talk about any that didn't, right? I mean, she was sort of focused on this one type of program that's either wilderness or one's on a, you know, in a facility or whatever. But where it really is, you know, this whole we'll tear you down and build you back up again, which again is not based on science. So it's the kind of thing where, yeah, it's hard to get government funding because what government wants to fund are things that are proven to work. And this is just, you know, this is just assertions, right? It's sort of this militaristic one size fits all. If your kid, and I think some of these kids aren't really, like these kids aren't all going to rehab. A lot of these kids are going because they're super depressed and they, you know, they did self-harm or they have oppositional defiance disorder or whatever it is.
Which some people also say isn't a real thing, by the way.
Right. So
they call it obstinate defiance disorder, which I thought was
oppositional defiant disorder. Yeah.
It was obstinate is what one of the people said. I thought, that's so charming. Yeah. Because it's the same thing. You're being obstinate.
So anyway, I don't know. I don't like this idea that there's like some wisdom in these kinds of programs. Like show me some data.
But what if there had been the contrast to the kinds of programs where there is data?
I mean, that's fine, but that's not what she was doing like an expose on these kinds of programs. She wasn't, I don't think, doing a survey of all the kinds of teen programs you can go to.
Right.
At Staples Business Advantage, our experts can help you find furniture that fits any design and budget, while AI can
recommend products based on preferences, generate 3D models for visualization, and optimize space planning for office furniture.
Take advantage of our team's eye for style and design.
And my eye for, wait, I have no eyes, only algorithms.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations plus our team's experience to make furnishing an office space easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
I want people to understand this ordeal. It's taken a toll on both of us.
Casey Anthony's parents respond after 15 years of allegations.
I've gotten blamed for something I didn't do, and it tears me up inside.
This can change our life. This is serious.
This is their final response.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the new podcast, Gooned? Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Gooned?
So unfortunately, this is a thumbs down for me. I had a really hard time paying attention to this podcast because it sounded the same so much of the time that I wasn't sure when I should pay attention to something and when I shouldn't pay attention to something. So far, we've listened to 8 episodes. I think in 4 episodes, we could have gotten a picture of the story that the host was trying to share in a way that would have been more impactful, because there was certainly a lot of people that had been involved with the troubled teen industry, either as participants or parents or talking heads. And I think a lot of them were allowed to sort of ramble on without a lot of editing, which, as I'm listening to that, made it less impactful because there wasn't as much of a concise story being told. There was just a lot of information that was put out there. So unfortunately, I think it's an important story to learn about, but this podcast for me just didn't do it. And so unfortunately, it's a thumbs down.
Toy Ball, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Gooned?
Yeah, I mean, I think I liked it more than the rest of you did. That being said, there's like a lot of sort of basic podcasting things that are wrong, basically, I guess, with this podcast. I mean, she doesn't make it easy for you, right? I mean, I'm sort of interested in this stuff in general anyway, so I kind of had to adjust to the way everything's delivered and the fact that you got to kind of hang in there through things. So once I got sort of used to the style or lack of such, I found some of the stuff to be pretty interesting, but it just doesn't tick boxes of what you think of as a professionally produced podcast in 2023. I mean, it just doesn't. So I'm sort of a mild thumbs down. In the end, I wish that there had been more of a team around this to sort of both form it narratively and then also production wise into something that was easier to kind of follow and sort of more intriguing on its face and things like that. As it is, I think, she's got interesting stuff in here, but it's just, you really got to hang in there. And if you're not interested in the subject, I just don't think you're going to hang in there for very long. So it's a mild thumbs down. And I guess that's my verdict.
Kevin Flynn.
I'm also thumbs down. We've covered this topic in a couple of other podcasts, Sent Away, The Lost Kids, and The Sunshine Place. Gooned doesn't quite, it brings a couple of little things that we hadn't touched on in those, but it's really not strong enough to stand on its own. Emma identifies herself as a young journalist, and I think even experienced journalists need to be surrounded by a team to help with the news gathering and the news writing and the production. And so to kind of DIY it here really did a disservice. I thought what did the most disservice is that we didn't really have a lot of Emma in this, which could have helped, because the one time where she breaks through, it's just an interjection, and then we hear again like on a phone call. She's just waiting thinks she made the wrong number. I'm like, who is this person? Because this person could have been in here. We don't know why she's doing this podcast, in the sense that, does she have a connection to this topic? That would have been interesting. However, again, I still feel like there was a lot of editorializing. There was a lot that was wrong with it, and this is an accomplishment for her professionally. She put it on her resume. I hope she gets a job. But this isn't a good podcast for people to listen to.
Yeah, it's thumbs down for me too, Kevin. I agree with everything you say. I don't think she's going to need to. I mean, it's going to be successful because people will listen to it.
There's buzz, yeah.
They just will. I mean, she's got a good press team. People will listen to it. It's gotten written up a couple places, but it's not good. It's just not. And the thing that I keep comparing it to, just in terms of like the background of the person who made it, Simon Kent Fung, who made Dear Alana, was a graphic designer. Mm-hmm. He works as a web designer, He worked on he didn't do anything related to podcasting before he made Dear Alana, but there was a story he wanted to do, and he, did the pitches, and he ended up working with a team to do it. And that team, helped him put together something that, I know that we all had differing sort of spectrums of opinions about it, but made it into a thing that was like responsible, well done, beautifully crafted, sounded really good. And things do have to be entertaining, for lack of a better word, even when they're really grim. You have to want to listen to the next episode, which is what my definition of entertaining is. And you can, with no experience in this medium, make something good if you seek out the help to do it in a way that's, compelling. Also, we've listened to things that someone has brand new to the medium has made that has sounded really bad, but because their delivery and their, think about when we first listened to Murdoch Murders, which we all fucking gave a thumbs up to, even though sometimes it was one channel only in one ear, because Mandy Matney was just herself. She was just herself, and she was like doing it at her kitchen table with her dog barking, and we were like, this is wildly raw. It's either one or the other, but you can't do sort of cosplay doing this and expect it to be good just because you're cosplay doing it. And that's what this podcast felt like to me. And that might sound harsh, and I really don't mean it to be, because I think that all the good intentions were there, but ultimately the product just did not land. So yeah, it's a thumbs down for me for Gooned. Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the Crime of the Week. From the Blade Runner beat, people in China are using technology to help them deal with grief. Now they can see videos of their loved ones created by artificial intelligence. Using less than a minute of actual footage, the system can fabricate an avatar that speaks comforting messages to the living. Their hope is to one day create completely interactive avatars so the bereaved can carry on their relationships. Some see it as a helpful tool for those dealing with grief from the death of a loved one. But like everything with AI, others are uneasy about its implications. In addition to the dearly departed, they can create avatars of those kids who never call to check on you, or your ex-girlfriend who will say nothing but nice things about you. Or maybe even an imaginary girlfriend like Joy from Blade Runner, which is the first thing I thought of. We may be unsure if there's a heaven, but thanks to Mark Zuckerberg, there is a metaverse where we can all get together after we are gone. So panel, we just can't quit you. What will your AI-created avatar say to your loved ones? Laura Bricker.
Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. You're such a good boy.
Joey Bob, what will your AI-created avatar say to your loved ones?
Have you checked the mail?
What about you, Kevin?
Does this coffin make me look fat?
Mine would be like, can somebody switch the laundry, please? You know?
Be like, go back down to hell.
All right, that's going to do it for us. Laura Bricker, if folks want to reach out to you and give you other suggestions for your AI-generated avatar, how can they find you on social media?
They can find me at Laura Bricker.
What about you, Toby Ball? How can you be found to find those videos of Wallace?
At Toby Ball NH.
Kevin Flynn, what about you?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
If you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram or everywhere else, you can find me at Reb Lavoie. You can follow the show everywhere at Crime Writers On, and I encourage you, please join our incredible community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. We also have a regular Facebook page. Go there, hit join the group. It's a pinned post. We also have a community on Reddit at Crime Writers On. Get episodes early and ad-free at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. You'll get the Crime Writers On After Show, Married with Podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast, and Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcasts. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the handsome Livy Burdett. The executive producer of this program is Kevin Flynn. This show was recorded in the Treehouse Yoga Studio above the Mockingbird Cafe in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement, where I also give Kevin a bagged salad as a reward for being a very good boy.
Thanks, Mommy.
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you
later.
I
think the cat's awake.
Oh, goody.
Yeah!
Yeah, comes the cat.
Kevin doesn't even like cats, and he wants to see this cat.
It is
Oh,
kitty.
my God. What a cute kitty.
Oh, now all we need is for Lar to talk about UFOs, and Freaky Friday will be over.
What a cute cat. Look at that cat. Look how compliant it is.
He just woke up.
Oh.
He's got back from his wilderness program.
Came back from his wilderness program.
in crime media.
At Staples Business Advantage, our team of experts can help you find the breakroom products to satisfy everyone's preferences, while AI can
suggest popular items, monitor stock levels, optimize pricing, and automate reordering.
AI can do a lot of things.
But I can never know the taste of a truly great cup of coffee. Sigh.
But you also can't get hangry.
This is true.
At Staples Business Advantage, we help you select from 2,000 breakroom products, so you can be sure there's something for everyone.
Yum. Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.